Hey ladies, okay, so this video is for anyone who ever gets stuck with their self-esteem. Now, the way that you know you have an issue with self-esteem is if you feel like it's holding you back in any way, in any area of your life. I'm very big on being honest with ourselves and knowing where we want to grow. I'm doing that work myself all the time, especially right now. But at the same time, if we know that the action that we need to take, we know what it is, but then we're not doing it because we feel like we could never do it, because we're not good enough, because we're not worthy, any of those things, and we end up spinning in our heads and ruminating on that instead, what we end up doing is robbing ourselves and the world of ourselves, of who we are, of who we could be, because we're more comfortable in self-criticism. So this happens for a lot of us, and the question that came up recently with one of my clients, which inspired this week's podcast episode, was if we have people that we go to who tell us how great we are, right? We all have friends, hopefully, or mentors or teachers or therapists or people who can tell us, what we do well, and, that we're doing fine, and that this is all normal, this is all human. And it does feel good. It gives us that dopamine hit. It might even give us that oxytocin, that like bonding hormone, right? Where we start to feel close to that person and loving towards that person. We for sure feel better about ourselves when we get compliments. But the problem is that long term, it creates this cycle of dependence where we just keep coming back to them. So why? Why can't we all have just one time in our life heard you're good, you're worthy, your value is inherent, and never need to hear it again? Why do we need to hear it over and over? And here is the reason, and it's a little bit geeky, which is why I know all of us are gonna love it, because if you've been following me for any time at all, you kind of love the science like I do. And what it is that our brains work with association. Okay, so what is your brain associating? We have to step back and think about it. When someone gives you a compliment, are you now making the association of, oh, now I am a good person? Only if you really believe it. But then, do we actually go and practice that thought over and over? Remember, our brains, the neural pathways in our brains are like little roads, and they're teeny little roads, and sometimes the road doesn't even exist yet. And then we get a new idea or a new thought, and we have that little road. But until we travel that road over and over and over again, it doesn't become a superhighway, right? It just becomes this teeny little road, and our brain wants to go on the superhighways. They're so much more comfortable to drive, right? So when we go and we get someone else to tell us that we're okay, it does feel good, and you can totally do it. I think we should all tell each other that we're wonderful all the time, but it doesn't usually make the association for ourselves that we are good, and it doesn't train our brains to start thinking that thought, right? Now, I'm saying good, which is very generic, but you need to think for yourself. What is the area that might be holding you back? Maybe you think you're not good with money. Maybe you think you're not good with organization. Maybe you think you're too shy, you're too introverted. Maybe you think you're too much for people, right? Any of these things. So what is that thing? And then instead of looking outside yourself, because the other thing is that when someone else gives us a thought, part of our brain's job is to decide what we think about that thought. But when we come up with a thought, a lot of my work is dealing with the fact that when we come up with a thought, our brain usually believes it pretty quickly, right? Unless we're trying to think a new thought, a more productive thought. But a lot of the work that I do with people is like, hey, did you ever think about whether that thought was helping you? And then they're like, no, that really isn't working for me at all. And I actually don't even think it's true, right? And then we get to move along. So basically the idea is when we go outside ourselves for validation, we end up getting an association with other people and what they think of us. We're not actually getting an association with ourselves and what we think of us. And so in this week's episode, I talk about the specific homework that you can do. This video is getting a little long, so I want to cut it here. But what homework you can do to start to build that highway for yourself in your brain. And I think this is really, really important work to do. I mean, take a second and think about how you would be showing up differently for yourself and for everyone in your life if you weren't struggling with self-esteem. I want you to be able to generate your own confidence and your own self-worth, because I firmly believe that every single one of the people that are listening have inherent value, right? And so when we're spinning in it, it's just a waste of our time and energy, and we all do it, and it's totally normal. But I want you to be able to generate that for yourself so you don't have to go looking for it elsewhere. And you know what? When you generate that confidence and that self-esteem for yourself, then it's much more effective, because again, you're building the correct association in your brain, and so it's going to last a lot longer. You're going to be building a neural pathway that you can be using over and over again until it becomes your default way of thinking. Can you imagine that? If that was just, of course I think of course I think I'm good with money, of course I think I'm good at my job, of course I am, right? If that was just an obvious, think about how differently you would be showing up. All right, so I would love to hear from all of you. I want to hear you guys doing the work. Let me know if you've heard the podcast. And see you back here later. Bye-bye.